My name is Joachim Knudsen, and I'm the managing director for McDonald's in Denmark. As Esben was saying, we are a big company, also a big kitchen, and we say with great size comes also great responsibility, and seen from our perspective also great opportunities. In Denmark alone, we serve 160,000 meals a day. Of that is many, of course, what we call traditional products, cheeseburgers, fries, etc. But we also serve an increasing size of whole grain products and also carrots that we also talked about earlier this morning, as well as organic eggs and a lot of coffee. This is only in a Danish context. In a global context, we're slightly bigger. We serve 68 million customers a day. And I think that was the reference one of our earlier speakers had when she talked about McGlobe. But we serve 68 million customers a day throughout the globe in our 36,000 restaurants. Obviously, having so many restaurants, so many employees mean that we have got to have quite strict procedures handling or delivering safe food to all these customers coming visiting us every single day. Because if we have an issue with food safety, we get hurt, of course, with guests not visiting our restaurants, and that is, of course, a big implication for us. So the way that we secure safe food to our high standards is, of course, both on the supplier side, having high standards on the suppliers, as well as ongoing controlling them, both from the internal side, but also from the external side. And then, of course, our restaurants. As I said before, today in Denmark we have 4,500 employees, and we have more than 400,000 employees globally. So being able to have high standards for food safety in our restaurants is of course pivotal in order to deliver safe food to all our guests. That is also being taken care of by internal and external partners, and I'll come back to that shortly. Just a few words in terms of how we're handling our suppliers in general. We don't own our supply chain structure. We have corporations with multiple farms and plantations, etc., throughout the world, delivering beef and chicken and vegetable, lettuce salad and hamburger buns and fruit, etc., throughout the world, and that is taken care of primarily by regional or national or regional supply chain. But of course, having the standards, ensuring the quality, the same standard that we serve throughout the world is super important for us. And to that we have defined the supplier quality management system, which basically is the McDonald's system that we, or the standards we impose on all our suppliers throughout the world. We like to say that because of our size, we have the opportunity of affecting industry standards and actually raising the standards for the industry, and I have a few examples of that also further down in my presentation. Not only do we monitor our suppliers according to our own supplier quality management system several times a year, and of course some suppliers receive more auditation than others, especially beef suppliers have 5 to 6 internal audits a year, and less important suppliers like carton suppliers have once or twice a year. We also engage external companies to get an external perspective on how our suppliers are performing according to our own requirements, and that is at least once a year. Of course, full traceability, we want to know where everything is coming from, whether it be beef, chicken, carton, or plastic. So we have our standards, and everything not living up to that is of course removed and not being transported to our restaurants. We have requirements for animal welfare, social accountability, and of course sustainability on various levels, and I can't of course go through all this today, but as I said, I have 2 examples from some of our suppliers. But we like to say that we want to increase the industry standards for what is good for our suppliers, what is good for our customers, and what is good for McDonald's. Today we buy almost 100% of our chicken from a Danish chicken that is in McDonald's Denmark, from a Danish chicken supplier called Danpo, which is situated outside one of the biggest cities in Denmark, Aarhus. Danpo has been a long supplier for McDonald's Europe, especially on chicken for many years, and we have had, as I said, a long-standing relationship with Danpo. What we do is we actually set up higher standards than what the EU requires, or for that matter, the national legislation requires, on various levels, both in terms of the space available for the chickens in the cages, also the use of antibiotics. We want our suppliers to use less antibiotics than what is required by the EU and by Danish regulations. We also have stricter requirements as to transportation time. to the butcheries, and everything involving the animal welfare. We incentivize our supplier, in this case Danpo. The fewer injuries that the chickens have, the more money they get from McDonald's in order to have higher animal welfare from our suppliers. Also, we go one step back in the supply chain and make sure that the feedstuff that are being given to the chickens are actually also we have requirements to that, and that we're also auditing and making sure it complies to our global standards on feedstuff as well. So this is a short example of the requirements that we set on some of our suppliers, in this case our chicken supplier. Another supplier is Espersen Fish. It's also a Danish supplier that delivers fish to McDonald's in 38 countries in Europe. They're situated in the most eastern part of Denmark, an island called Bornholm, and they're the largest processor of frozen fish in Europe. They've been a supplier for McDonald's since 1971, and what they like to say to us when we visit them once a year is that they, as a fish supplier, has improved their standards and their ethics throughout the year, being a supplier to McDonald's. So they feel that McDonald's has led the way by the standards we've imposed to them as a fish supplier, enabling them to have other customers like British Tesco or other retailers in Europe, because they now have such a high standard when it comes to handling their fish due to McDonald's. Right now we are testing if we can do even better when it comes to fishing fish in the Arctic water, where we basically try to test if we can have the net 10 meters above the bottom of the sea and fish in that way, preventing us from, of course, trawling the bottom of the sea, and then protect the Arctic waters up there, where a lot of the fish that Espersen is selling throughout Europe is coming from. And that has again enabled them to make some giant leap forwards, also having other retail customers, simply because they've been working actively with McDonald's to improve their fishing methods. Oh, I'm sorry, you should have told me that I should have flipped the slide. This was the example from Espersen Fish. So that was on the supplier side, where we have a lot of high standards that we impose on our suppliers, and given that we have or believe in lifelong partnerships with our suppliers, they're actually also in that way incentivized to improve their methods because it makes sense for them to evolve the relationship with McDonald's as a supplier. When it comes to the restaurants, as I said, we have many restaurants and we have many employees, and there of course is many ways that this can go wrong, not securing safe food to our customers. So having high standards in our restaurants is of course extremely important as well. First and foremost, we have in Denmark a food safety department, the DVFA, Danish Food Authorities, where Esme is actually heading up the Danish Food Authorities. And for some 20 years or so, I think the Danish food authorities have had this consumer-facing smiley program, where basically food auditors go out in all the restaurants in Denmark and check whether the restaurants lives up to both food safety but also hygiene procedures. And if the restaurants do so, they get a smiley, and there's various levels of smileys. If you get 4 really happy, if you get if you get 4, then something froze. I think it's sort of froze. Anyhow, if you get 4 happy smileys in a row, then you get an elite smiley. But these smileys, they are derived by 2 visits from the food authorities, from Esben's department, and then you get an elite smiley. And 2/3 of our restaurants in Denmark have this elite smiley, which again is a consumer-facing label that enables the Danish guest to see whether a restaurant has good hygiene and good food safety. But we even go beyond the requirements of the food authorities. So both when it comes to checking the temperature of our ingredients being delivered to our restaurants, but also checking the temperature of the meat, we have stricter requirements internally than the food authorities set up. That's a good indicator for us to ensure that we every day have our standards in control. And that is done, there's our own HACCP system, which we call MAC-HACCP, which is, as I said, done by our employees in all our restaurants, more or less on a daily basis. But not only do we rely on the Danish food authorities as well as our own procedures, we also have unannounced visits from external accreditation labs, which is called eSmiley, which basically are doing the same job as the food authorities, but they give us an extra chance to make sure that we comply to the standards of our own standards, but also the food authority standards. And then finally, we have an external company also checking microbiology that also comes to our restaurants once a year to make sure that we comply with both the food authority regulation, the food authorities standards as well as our own standards. Finally, as I said, we have 4,500 employees in Denmark alone and around 60 employees per restaurant. So training of all employees is critical to make sure we comply to the both hygiene standards as well as our food quality. So the first thing, and given that we have a high rotation of employees, we have a lot of new employees coming to our restaurants every single month. So the first thing that happens when a new employee starts at a McDonald's restaurant, he or she is trained in hygiene as well as food safety, and that is mandatory. Then the first 14 hours that the new employees work in is it's what we call shoulder training, one-on-one floor training, where the employees are actually trained in, of course, both working in our restaurant, but also complying to the hygiene, the food safety standards. And then no more than 30 days after a new employee has started, he or she needs to take a mandatory test, and that test is being recertified minimum once a year, depending on how long the employee are with McDonald's. So, to sum it up, we believe at McDonald's that the industry has a huge role securing safe food. And the way that we do this is always live up, or even better, exceed the food safety standards in the industry. In terms of the food supply chain, it's extremely important that we are as transparent as possible, enabling both the food authorities as well as the consumer, having full transparency into how we are handling our supply chain and our suppliers. We also believe, in the Danish example here, that the authorities have also a huge role in creating clear and easy to understand guidelines, enabling not only McDonald's but also a huge fragmented restaurant industry or business to understand what are the rules and regulations. And then our wish is, of course, that we have continuity when it comes to the easy to understand guidelines, and then we have no panic regulations coming from the food authorities, but we have continuity. And then, of course, that we have similar rules that apply everywhere, and they're based on objectivity rather than subjectivity. And finally, we also believe that the consumers are very much part of this journey, and that they should demand great food hygiene, and that the Smiley stamp is a very good way of ensuring this. And of course, that the consumers should keep on demanding transparency, both for from the authorities, but also very much from the industry side, also from McDonald's. So that was short and sweet on how we see food safe food in our business.